Hi all. As a special treat today, I'm going to try and relay a personal kind of lecture given to me and my good friend Jan by Varuzin Akobian. We were waiting at the airport for a flight which was eventually cancelled. It was going to be from Gibraltar to Luton Airport, and Luton Airport was not functioning properly. So anyway, Varuzin went over this key game in the French defence. We'd missed one of his night lectures that he had given to people in the tournament. So he went over the game personally with us. He was black in this game against Alexander Shabalov. So it was played in Vermont back in 2003. And if you play the French defence and want to know what to play against the advanced variation, so that's white advancing the pawn to e5. So this is maybe an instructive game to look at. c5, and after c3, here Varuzin had played queen b6. Now I had thought that this was a kind of old line, but he played it in a kind of modern way. I thought it was an old line because I thought like knight c6 and Juve's waiting move, bishop d7, was more trendy. Because also with this queen b6, well, the idea is often to play bishop d7 and bishop b5. You're trying to get rid of this French defence bad bishop and swap it for white's light square bishop. If you manage to achieve that, usually you're okay because white has these pawns on dark squares, and subsequently these light squares are often weaker later. So this exchange is quite valuable often. After knight f3, he did indeed play bishop d7, and what he had also said though about queen b6 is tying down the bishop on c1. So if he plays cd later, you know, that pawn would have to recapture. As a general principle, the pawn on c3 is going to recapture on d4. But he actually he didn't play bishop b5 here. He did indeed play c takes d4. Sorry, after bishop d3, he played c takes d4. Now, if bishop b5, I think we do have that c4 pawn gambit, which is you have to know your stuff as black. So it's interesting, you know, this idea of queen b6. He's injecting, you know, a modern way of playing it by playing c takes d4. And if white plays c takes d4, then bishop b5, and you're avoiding the c4 pawn gambit. But white kind of tricked him now. He played knight takes d4. So, you know, white is kind of occupying the centre with pieces now. This was an old Nimzovich thing, that you don't actually have to occupy the centre with pawns. You can actually apply lots of piece pressure to still the same central squares. And that's what white was doing. So, Varuzin played knight c6, and white now took on c6, and Varuzin didn't mind just blocking in his bishop a bit more temporarily. So he's strengthening his centre. That's the key thing here, to strengthen d5. And after white castled, there's a slight problem though, in that this bishop potentially is very dangerous if black ever wanted to castle kingside. And Varuzin wanted to sort of, you know, block this bishop in. So he played f5. And now white played c4. So white is playing it in a, you know, very kind of aggressive way now, this c4, immediately trying to undermine the seemingly, you know, strengthened black centre. After knight e7, now knight c3. And now Varuzin, he counterattacks on e5, that e5 pawn. So how is white defending this? It's not that easy to defend it. You know, maybe rook e1. Let's have a look. What does Rybka think of rook e1? Thinks actually black... Let's flip the board again here, sorry. Thinks black's a bit better here. Bishop e7 is given. Knight a4, queen b8. So anyway, it thinks black's fine at least. But what white played was actually bishop e3. So offering this b2 pawn. But also seemingly, you know, trying to trick black into playing d4 when apparently knight a4 is going to be strong. Because, you know, then if the queen moves, then bishop takes d4. But Varuzin had seen a bit deeper here. He played d4 anyway. Maybe, you know, queen takes b2 though, according to Rybka, is playable, at least on low depth. Unless, you know, but maybe white would just gain long-term compensation after bishop d4. This gets a bit hairy actually, because now c5, rook b1, queen a3, and I'm intuitively uncomfortable with this position because the black king's still in the centre, and white's pieces are looking quite menacing now. And actually, at least, you know, Rybka's giving equal evaluation with c takes d5. It's a bit of a mess. I'm not going to go any further in that line. Let's just say, let's go back to this position. After bishop e3, Ruzin decided to play d4 because he saw that knight a4 wasn't that great. After knight a4, he could still play queen a5. So he's got a little trick now up his sleeve. Bishop takes d4 is now answered by c5, attacking a4 and d4. So if bishop takes d4, c5, and black's clearly winning, getting a big advantage here, just winning a piece. So basically, white had to go on the retreat with bishop d2. So potentially, Ruzin's got a nice d4 pawn here. But look at his bishop, it's still a bit, hemmed in here. But he's also got this free pawn to take. But his king's in the centre, and generally, you don't want to be too active with your kings in the centre. It could easily backfire. But in this particular position, he takes the risk. One of the things, he had mentioned to me, we had actually, on our flight to Gibraltar, bumped into him in the airport as well, myself and Jan. And I was asking him, about Nimzovich, and, is there some, generic, strategy that he uses? But he said, just play the position, play the best move in the position. And, I tried to probe him a bit more. Surely, you don't, you learn from experience, you create these generalizations, don't you at all? He says, basically, that stuff becomes automatic after. When you get more experience, the general principles, they're kind of automatic. And you're still, you have a bearing with them, but you are just trying to find the best move in the position. So here, it seems a principle breaking move. Queen takes e5. So he's basically going to soak up, the pressure from white by taking this central pawn with his king still stranded in the centre. So rook e1, and he moves his queen to f6, and now c5. So white's going to try and use this diagonal as well, and this poor pawn on e6. So how does, Ruzin untangle his pieces and try and put his king into safety? He plays first bishop e7, and after queen b3, there's another immediate concern here, the queen coming to b7. So how is he going to stop this queen invasion? Well, he takes a move to retreat his bishop to c8, so he's protecting still that b7 square. And for the moment, he's hanging on to e6, because white, if white tries to immediately put pressure with bishop c4, then according to Rybka here actually, Ruzin's got knight e5, and let's have a look. Is also king f7 playable? Maybe this is more dangerous than just simply playing knight e5. Okay, but actually in the game, white kept the bishop on d3 for the moment, just played f4. So white's going for a sort of longer term bind on e5, and just trying to keep this pawn backwards and just trying to torture black with it, just to make sure it can't ever liberate with e5. But Ruzin, he manoeuvres to try and create this liberating move e5 to make it possible. So what he does is bishop d8. So the bishop's going to come to c7. And no, he hasn't castled yet. He's in no rush to castle at the moment. After bishop c4, so the question of e6 is asked now, and he defends it simply with his king. So king f7, it's adequate in this particular position. White can't build up quickly enough to exploit e6, but he does, prepare the doubling of rooks. So rook e2, so he's going to play rook e1. So rook e8 to defend e6, rook a1 putting more pressure, and now a move is given finally for black to breathe a little. He plays bishop c7. So the bishop is supporting eventual liberation with e5, but it's immediately targeting f4. So white protects the f4 pawn, not by playing g3 here, although g3 is the Rybka kind of recommendation. White plays queen f3, and simultaneously it's attacking c6, so it's defending f4, attacking c6. So the bishop on c8 again moves to d7, moves back to d7, and now white decides to try and put some pressure on black on the queen side, starts moving his queen side pawn. So he plays b4, Ruzin plays now king f8, so he's unpinning the e6 pawn, preparing maybe e5. If he can get his central pawns going, that would be great for black, because this d4 pawn was, an asset gained tactically earlier in the opening with that, that queen a5. But if it's combined with this pawn coming up to e4, then black's, central pawns are really going to be more effective.